Chapter 16. A closer look at the Colonel. Knowing when and where to invest for war was the key. Look at the beginning of the LTV empire, for example. One of its early, large investors, the previously mentioned D. Harold Byrd, was previously a stockholder in Timco Corporation, a company that was trying to make money in an aircraft business but without the benefit of a war. It was Byrd's suggestion to Ling that they should consider merging the two entities into a viable defense-oriented company. As pointed out in the previous chapter, LTV went on to grow, gather strength and breadth, and prosper, largely due to the military contracts and the war in Vietnam. The aircraft procurement program of the United States committed over $6 billion for the purchase of military aircraft during the fiscal year of 1963 to 1964 alone. LTV's award of the A-7 was one of the biggest. A few weeks before the November 1963 assassination, Byrd and partner James Ling, both prominent supporters of Johnson, bought over 130,000 shares of LTV stock. A month earlier, in October of 1963, Ling and another investor, Troy Post, another supporter and friend of LBJ, bought additional shares of LTV stock. The price of LTV stock varied in a range of $13 to $19 a share in 1963. But by 1967, this same stock grew to a value of $203. Truly an outstanding, astute investment, especially in a market in 1963 where aerospace investments had been in a decline as compared to the stock market in general. When we begin to look a little closer at D. Harold Byrd, the nephew of the famous Admiral Byrd, there was one major detail that jumped out at us. It wasn't the fact that he was a staunch right-winger and a personal friend of Lyndon Johnson, nor was it the fact that he founded the Civil Air Patrol, an organization to which Lee Harvey Oswald once belonged. What intrigued us was the fact that D. Harold Byrd, a Dallas millionaire and oil tycoon, was the owner of the Texas Schoolbook Depository Building. It was from this building's 6th floor that a fusillade of shots ended the life of President Kennedy. The startling discovery of D. Harold Byrd's ownership of the Book Depository Building came from an article written by researcher William Weston and appeared in the September 1993 issue of the Third Decade. I contacted Mr. Weston and talked at length with him about his research into the monolith of Enigma, the Texas Schoolbook Depository Building. Indeed, Weston assured me Colonel Byrd purchased the building at 411 Elm Street in 1936 to manufacture air conditioning equipment. Later, the building was leased out to various tenants, such as the John Sexton Company, a wholesale restaurant and grocery supply company. Apparently, the Sexton Company vacated the premises sometime in 1962. A few months before the assassination, the Schoolbook Depository Company became the new tenants, moving from their former location across the street, the Del Tex building. That fact alone should have made investigators suspicious. The tenants of the Elm Street building, used as the platform for the assassination, had just recently moved in. To back up the fact, an FBI report dated November 23, 1963, is quoted in Weston's article. Quote, Roy S. Truly, warehouse manager, Texas Schoolbook Depository, advised that the Texas Schoolbook Depository has occupied the building at 411 Elm Street for only a few months. Prior to this time, the building was occupied by a wholesale grocery company engaged in supplying restaurants and institutions, and during the course of their occupancy, the floors of the building became oil-soaked. and this oil was found to be damaging the stock of the schoolbook depository thereon. In view of this, they had instituted a process of covering the floor with sheets of plywood. The process was being performed by the regular warehouse employees whenever they had slack periods of work. Actually, Harold Norman, in his interview with me, discredited the last part of the above FBI statement. Norman, you recall, stated that there was an outside contractor that was employed to repair the flooring, and the building workers were used in assisting the crew.
Some of the guys would kind of go up there, kind of help out and move stuff around. Oh, you mean some of the people that worked with you would go up and help these guys? Now, this was an outside contractor? Yes. And how many people would you say were strangers at that time that were in and out of the building working on the floor? I think probably about 5 or 6, or maybe 8, about 5 or 6 of them. Yeah. But was it just on the 6th floor that they were working? Well, at that particular time, it was. I think they planned on doing some work on the 7th floor, too. On the 7th floor? Was the 7th floor empty? Yeah, just as much as we stored a bunch of junk up there.
Weston seems to think that the timing of the move-in was no accident. He states in his article, "Not much is known about this company. Bear in mind there is a distinction between the TSBD as the company and the TSBD building, which was at 411 Elm Street, or the people who worked for it. Yet for the little information that can be gathered, I believe," Weston said, "the direction of the evidence points only one way, that the organizers of the plot had complete control of the book depository building." Unquote. Who arranged for this sudden transfer of tenants? Weston writes, "The man who brought about this transition was a very successful oil tycoon named D.H. Byrd. He held the same ultra-conservative political views as other Texas oilmen, such as H.L. Hunt and Clint Murchison. Byrd was the founder of the Civil Air Patrol, which he organized to help with coastal patrol during World War II. In 1943, he was given the rank of colonel. If the move-in period was the summer of 1963, as the above FBI memo based on Roy Truely's statement seems to indicate, then it would parallel other strange developments during that time. Number 1, Lee Harvey Oswald was in New Orleans, busily trying to convince the world that he was pro-Castro. He was printing and publicly handing out leaflets, debating on radio, and being arrested in a street scuffle. All of this occurring in a relatively short period of time. And number 2, plans were being formulated for a presidential visit to Texas. Later, Oswald would move back to Dallas, where Ruth Payne, a friend of his wife, would recommend that he apply for a job at the schoolbook depository. He was hired immediately. Weston's research has revealed that the depository building was largely made up of office space, with the upper floors, 5th and 6th, being used as warehouse space. Of the 40 or so employees in the building, only 15 warehouse workers were allowed to use the stairway that accessed the upper floors. Anyone else was instructed to use the side-by-side freight elevators located near the stairway on the north side of the building, or the passenger elevator that extended only to the 4th floor. This arrangement definitely kept upper floor traffic to a minimum. If, as Weston suggests, the conspirators had complete control of the schoolbook depository, this would help explain how the rifles as well as the assassins got in and out of the building without detection. It also explains why Oswald, who quite possibly served as the assassination's team scapegoat, was so quickly zeroed in on as a suspect. Within minutes, building management determined that Oswald alone was missing and quickly provided the police at the scene with his address along with his physical description. Another thing that Weston pointed out was the appearance of the schoolbook depository's written records that were turned over to the FBI and the Warren Commission. There were only 3 documents as compared to the dozens of documents turned over by other employers of Oswald, and all 3 of these documents looked homemade and amateurish. Weston writes, "The problematical features of the TSBD documents indicate that none of them were genuine. Either the real ones do not exist or they contain information that the company did not wish to make public." Such a casual attitude, if not outright disdain for the simplest forms of documentation, leads to an increase in our curiosity about the kind of people who worked for this company. The actions of the schoolbook depository occupants, though suspicious, seemed to pale in contrast to the actions of its owner, Mr. Byrd. Within weeks following the assassination, he commissioned his own carpentry crew to remove the Oswald window from the southeast corner of the 6th floor, replacing it with a look-alike. He then had built a custom showcase for it and prominently displayed the macabre death window at his home among the dozens of animal trophies and souvenirs from around the world. After Colonel Byrd's death, his son returned the window display to the 6th floor museum in Dallas. It is no wonder, then, that a shroud of suspicion hangs over the rich and powerful Texans who befriended and supported Lyndon Johnson. During the research and investigation phase of this book, I had opportunity to communicate with a retired member of the intelligence community who told me about an event that he attended, a luncheon at the Petroleum Club in San Antonio in 1973. I couldn't pass up the chance to ask Texas oil guys their view of the Hunt family being involved in JFK's death. After much laughter, my host said, hell, half of Dallas was in on it. From what we have learned, Mark and I concur with this simple statement. Here's a photo of D.H. Byrd, taken in 1973. He's the one in the left with a white hat and dark coat, and LBJ at a UT football game. Friends, for many years, Byrd was a political and financial supporter of Johnson and the owner of the Texas Schoolbook Depository building in Dallas. I'd like to end this chapter by adding some information that's not part of the book, The Men on the 6th Floor. But it pertains to what we've been talking about. That's the Schoolbook Depository. In his book, Reasonable Doubt, Henry Hurt, the author, tells the account of Robert Easterling, a lifelong criminal. Easterling claims that he was part of a plot to kill Kennedy, and it all was linked to Cuba. Easterling's story of the guns that were brought in and out of the book depository is most interesting in the manner in which it was done. And although his confession to the author about his involvement is sketchy, Hurt was able to find some verification of many of Easterling's claim. Now, according to Easterling, a false bottom crate was used. Now, since we've already discussed the possibility of the Schoolbook Depository being completely under control of the owner, Harold Byrd, it would be a simple matter for him to get in and have his people arrange for any of these adjustments to be made in the interior of the Schoolbook Depository. In other words, the crate could have been designed by using some of the crates that are in the Schoolbook Depository. The crate was heavily constructed. It was about 5 feet long, 3 feet wide, 4 feet high, and in the floor of the box was a false bottom, concealing a compartment that housed a spring tension cradle designed to hold a rifle securely. No one would suspect that there was anything in the box when it was emptied. It was so heavy. The box with the rifle or rifles could be put in place ahead of the shooter's arrival. After the shooting, the rifle is quickly returned to the hidden compartment inside the box, so well hidden that it could be retrieved at a later date. Obviously, the search for other rifles ended with the recovery of the Carcano near the 6th floor stairway. That was about 1:22 p.m., less than an hour after the shooting. And there is no evidence that after the discovery of the Oswald rifle, or the Mannlicher Carcano, there was any further search of the building or its contents. And according to the Warren report, Hurt says that 10 days passed before the clipboard used by Lee Harvey Oswald was discovered on the 6th floor. His jacket was not found until late November. Clearly, there was no systematic search of the building once the rifle was discovered. Years later, Hurt was shown through the 6th floor of the building by a member of the Dallas County Historical Commission. The cavernous 6th floor was empty, but for a few cardboard cartons that were empty. However, the most prominent items on the floor were at least 7 heavy wood boxes. While not all the same, the empty boxes were generally of odd dimensions, strikingly similar to the box described by Easterling. The boxes were stamped with the names of publishing companies and addressed to the Texas School Book Depository. One of the boxes, for example, bore a stamp which indicated it had once been used to ship 500 copies of The Red Pony. Now here's the photograph of those boxes. And also, the Warren Commission exhibit shown here in this photo shows the 3 men who were on the 5th floor at the same time of the shooting. One of them was interviewed by myself. That's Harold Norman. He's one of the 3 there. But to the left of the men in the photograph, the photo shows plainly the presence of wooden book crates inside the stairwell leading down from the 6th floor. So here is perhaps the answer of why Harold Byrd's ownership of the School Book Depository was important to the assassins.